Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. This is part one of our Defense Innovation Funding Series, and today we're going to be focusing on the power of access. And what that means is we're going to be talking about how to build a DoD network that you can leverage to win funding. The reality is, if you're going after R&D programs like SBIRs, OTAs, BAAs, and you have a strong proposal and you're developing innovative and relevant dual use technology, you can win DoD SBIR funding. However, companies that consistently win and secure follow on funding and also ultimately move toward that major DoD contract that you're looking for when your technology is product ready, these companies tend to have one added advantage. They build strategic DoD networks, and relationships across the DoD dramatically strengthen your chances and help enhance the attention your technology and company ultimately receive. So our goal today is we're going to explain the scale of opportunity that's out there, and we're going to try to give you concrete tools and action items you can use to start building your own DoD network today. Just a little bit about, let me give you a chance to introduce the team. We're joined today by Sam Tefno. He's Grand Engine's CEO. Zev Orzi, Executive Director, Daniel Kolos, VP of Consulting, and I'm Josh Barone. I'm a Senior Advisor, and I focus on defense tech scouting. A little bit about our company. Our mission is pretty straightforward. Our goal is to save lives through innovation. And part of saving lives is to making sure the DoD has the most innovative technology all the way down to the warfighter. We do that by helping our clients to win non-dilutive funding that pays for R&D. Grant Engine is a team of 80 people, including PhDs, MBAs, grant professionals, and we have a headquarter in Research Triangle Park out of North Carolina. We apply a level of professionalism and a client-first attitude to everything we do, and our win rate is 2 to 4 times the national average. Today, we're going to focus on some of the best practices that we believe can really help in building the DoD network that you can leverage. I'll hand it over to Sam for a special announcement.
Hi, thanks so much, Josh. Welcome, everyone. It's a real honor and a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you. Grand Engine is in its 10th year. We have been in business with over 75 people standalone, and we traditionally have always focused on the life sciences for human health in both the Department of Defense, NIH, DARPA-H, and other areas. And our mission has always been about saving lives. And as we thought carefully about what that mission means to us and had the good fortune to be able to meet Zev and Daniel, we met in New York City and started a discussion around how we could combine forces. And that very quickly focused on early on in the culture and just the fabric of how we operate at Grand Engine, the ethos of what makes us special down to the person inside the organization, and what makes Aquila special, and what Zev and Daniel built with that team there, focused on defense tech, non-human health, and dual use applications. And the most important parts we got figured out pretty early, which was an alignment on a vision, alignment on a culture about excellence, client success. And I had the real opportunity to begin to learn and continue to learn from Daniel and Zev and the whole team at Aquila about what makes an excellent organization work, and what makes an excellent organization work in the defense domain. And I think all of us had an interest in combining forces. So we have done that. That got announced last month. And we're really excited about taking care of you, our clients. And we save lives on the life sciences domain by bringing new therapeutics, diagnostic tools, research tools, et cetera, to market. We save lives in the defense domain by protecting our way of life, our society, both protecting and taking care of the warfighter, and all of us as civilians, in protecting our way of life in this country and in other borders. So we're really excited about this combination. We have some things that are common in terms of excellence, high character, taking excellent care of our team, taking excellent care of you as our client. And some things are different, right? The products we build for our clients, the terminology is quite different at times. But I can promise you that this combination of serving you as Grant Engine is built on a bedrock of culture that is strong and committed to your success. And we wouldn't have done this with Zeb and Daniel and the full team, including Josh and Kevin and Melissa, and that growing team, if that bedrock culture of taking care of you for your success wasn't the most important priority. So those important things we share, and we're bringing excellence to the highest level that we can, really the highest level in the market space for your success. So I think today you're going to hear from experts in our company that are there to serve your space. So it's a really excellent agenda and a crucial topic for you to have success. So I'll hand it back over to Josh and Zev, who'll do most of the talking, but you've got a deep team across Grant Engine in the defense domain and dual use arena, and we're here to support you in your journey. So please be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. So let's take a look at the DoD scale of opportunity. The current landscape, as many of you probably have heard of the DoD SBIR budget, we're looking at just over $2 billion or around $2 billion annually. That's money which is earmarked exclusively for small US-based tech companies. The total DoD R&D budget is massive. We're talking about plus $150 billion annually, which includes extramural and intramural, which means some of it's going to research labs, but a lot of it is going to industry. Right now, the SBIR represents less than 4% of that R&D budget, which is called extramural, but that percentage is about to change in a major way. What's happening is the SBIR program is currently up for reauthorization, and conservative estimates right now are talking about an increase of up to 7%, or nearly doubling the SBIR budget. That's potentially $4 billion just in DoD's funding available. And that means that there is likely going to be double the number of topics to apply for, potentially larger award sizes. They're floating out an idea of a phase 1A funding, which is a micro investment, allowing the SBIR funding agency to offer more awards to test out performers before committing to full phase 1. And this is a generational expansion of defense innovation funding, which we're looking at. So now is really the time to look to building that network. The reason that it's now is because with the current opportunity trend to even a larger one, SBIRs and other grant programs still have a lot of competition. So there's more opportunity, yes, but there's still serious competition in these programs, which makes it hard to win the SBIRs, BAAs, OTAs, and other programs. And it can be hard to even advance once you already have a phase 1 to a phase 2. And it's even harder still to transition from R&D funding into eventually contracts and programs of record. So companies that have built their networks now will be positioned when this expansion hits and help you differentiate from being a company that wins an award or two into one that builds sustainable defense business. So this isn't necessarily optional or nice to have. It's the proper strategy if you're interested long-term in creating DoD business. This science and technology pathway, which means instead of jumping straight towards a contract, you're looking to the DoD to fund your research and development. There are many different mechanisms. You have SBIRs or STTRs, which the funding ranges from $50,000 up to $2 million. You have broad agency announcements, which are flexible and mission focused with a broader scope and also with much larger funding amounts. You have OTAs, which are meant to be rapid, non-traditional agreements that bypass the standard FAR requirements. And then you have innovation challenges like XTech or AFWorks or Naval X with a smaller amount of prize money, but they can rapidly lead to more significant contracting. Unlike DoD contracts where you deliver the finished product, the science and technology or R&D pathway allows you to do the R&D and be paid for it. And you're using these different programs to get both funding, but also ultimately eyes on your technology. So each win you get through these programs is building your DoD network brick by brick, but also you can go double down and go full in on building that network. Let's take a look at one of the R&D pathways, the SBIR program. The DoD SBIR, as we mentioned, is the largest federal program with a current budget of around $2 billion. Phase ones tend to be $75,000 to $250,000. And a phase two is $750,000 to $2 million. The DoD has 3 annual cycles plus monthly releases and out-of-cycle opportunities, meaning there's pretty much always an opportunity out there. All major services, including the Air Force, Army, Navy, Space Force, participate in the program, but so do others such as DARPA, Defense Logistics Agency, Defense Health Agency, SOCOM, and others. And each one has their specific focus, where their goal is to provide or to bring in new tools to the DoD and capabilities to enhance their competitive edge. So let's pause for a moment and take a look at poll number 1. Question here is, how familiar are you with the DoD's SBIR SC tier funding process? A good chance for people to answer to understand who the audience really is. Okay, awesome. So we see the majority of you seem to be either very familiar or somewhat familiar, but still learning. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So with the process of non-dilutive funding and using the SBIR as a template, let's just keep this in mind as we look at how it works with developing a network. Winning a non-dilutive program such as an SBIR OTA isn't just about writing a good proposal. It starts actually before the program is even released. It starts with confirming alignment, where you get a read on what the DoD is really in need of right now through priority reports, and also by speaking to DoD decision makers and end users. Once the solicitation is released, you can check your alignment with the text of the solicitation itself, and also start working to build and find those DoD champions from the right sub-agency, right? In other words, if it's an Air Force program, you probably want to find Air Force stakeholders and get an understanding about how they need, though the broader network might be helpful as well. You want to share materials and do outreaches, sharing Gantt charts and one-pagers. And as you're developing this, you want to always have your end user in mind. Also, there's typically a pre-release time frame prior to the official release. And in that period, it's a unique period where you can engage with the TPOCs, or the technical points of contact. They're the people who are charged with running the SBIR topic, and you can clarify with them that there's real interest for your proposal and the technology that you're developing. Once you get clear understanding that there is a need for what you're developing and you understand who the end user is, you can build the proposal focusing on telling a story that has the end user always in mind. And you want to keep a fine balance between conveying the technological upside of your tech, the greatness of the tech, but also not losing your reader. After the submission, it goes to the review process, and the winners are announced, and you can negotiate certain elements of the award prior to receiving it. This approach works because by the time you submit, you've already built the relationships. You have a better understanding of what the real need is, and you can build a better proposal with the end user in mind. And you've also gained the attention of the evaluator, so they might be looking for your proposal before you even submit it. If you look at the process of going from a phase 1 or an OTA all the way to market, well, this market has many different innovation valleys of death, as we like to call them in the DoD world, where you can win a phase 1 and that can set up a phase 2, but it might not happen. And if you have a network, it certainly has a better chance of happening. But after the phase 2, you need typically bridge funding. Unless you have you're closer to a development of your technology. If you need that bridge funding, like the programs like TACFI, StratFi, and AppFit, that's not the discussion today, but there are different DoD funding programs that can offer tens of millions of dollars in funding. But in order to get them, you're going to need that network to leverage a customer memorandum or a letter of support or an MOU that says that they're interested in your technology as it's being developed. At every stage, as you're trying to get to a contract, which is, remember, the goal of all DoD SBIRs is to contract with the DoD customer. The right network can help you advance your development closer to completion and eventually towards contract. Now, it might be a long term as you're trying to get there, but the return on investment is very high. This slide shows the return on investment for any SBIR funding from the DoD, and not just phase one. The indirect pathway, starting with science and technology development with their non-dilutive funding, is something that ultimately pays dividends. As you see here, companies that received DoD SBIR funding generated $28 billion in sales to the DoD, and nearly 5 times that in total sales. So the SBIR becomes this entry point to building a sustainable business that you can repeatedly use by getting another phase one, another phase two, but also you can use this pathway ultimately to lead towards a contract. The mindset you have to have here is don't just look at the initial award amount. Think about the long-term business relationships and market validation this funding enables. And we can take a pause right now and do another poll here real quick. How important is winning non-dilutive funding relative to other priorities in your company? It's a good question as we're delving a little deeper in this DoD network building, get an understanding of how important it is for you and your business. Okay, so we're getting a range of answers here from mission critical, most important, that's about 25% of you. Half of you say it's an important priority, and about 25% say that is a possible interest. So we just look at the other option, which is a direct contract. It's also fantastic. It's a great way to build DoD business because you're essentially delivering on that contract. But drawbacks is that it's not for everybody. It requires mature, commercially ready technology. And you need to have existing DoD champions with a past performance and history. And it might be great for established companies with the networks and proven track records, but there's no R&D funding attached to it. You have to spend your own money to develop the technology because they're ready to do business with you right now. So the challenge here is most innovative dual-use companies don't have the ability to start here. So what they do is they start with the indirect pathway and they build credibility and relationships first while also getting their R&D funding. So now that we've covered the opportunity and the need for building a DoD network, of course we could go we talk about this at length, but at this point, I think what's really helpful is we're going to share some practical steps that you can start implementing immediately. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Zev Orsi, GrantEngine's Executive Director and former co-founder of Aquila Consulting.
Thanks, Josh. So, as Josh laid out, having a DoD network is obviously an immensely important step into getting involved, but it's not as hard as it might seem to at least broach the topic. When you're looking at your DoD network and trying to build that out, the obvious first step is just looking at your existing network on the commercial side, looking at your investors, your customers, partners, people you're connected to, and seeing who might have a connection to those DoD stakeholders. Because truthfully, we think of it as being this closed box and this secret world within itself, but it's actually much more apparent and accessible than it might seem. And oftentimes the people that are on the inside are trying to reach out to industry. And so they've already made connections with VCs. They've already made connections with other firms in your industry, and they're waiting for you to knock on the door too. And so, Josh, if you can just go to the next slide. I think something that's really important to not shy away from is utilizing open source as your friend. And when I say that, I mean, of course, doing your research and understanding where the national strategic priorities lie and acquisition priorities lie. But beyond that, also, just finding ways of identifying the right people who are promoting certain programs within the DoD and sending them cold emails. Those people's jobs are just as much to find you as it is your job to find them. So meeting them in the middle and building those bridges is incredibly impactful. And understanding where the local bases are in your region, where the R&D centers are, where the defense accelerator programs are, any outlet that is out there is tremendously impactful. And to go a step further, some of these agencies have portals where you can just submit white papers through an open portal and create those conversations through like a simple submission process. If you look at programs like Air Force Tech Connect and Space Force Front Door, these are portals that are made for, people that don't necessarily have a defense network built out yet, but are ready to get involved in that and have capabilities that provide serious impact to the defense mission. And so, Josh, if you can just go to the next slide. This is kind of a small way of getting your foot in the door with that outreach and just making those early connections. And this is a trick that we like to utilize too, which is on every DoD solicitation, or almost every DoD solicitation that you'll see through the SBIR program, you're going to see a TPOC involved in that. And essentially, a TPOC, technical point of contact, their job is to sort of push the solicitation forward, sort of define the topic area, define the strategic capability, and go after it. And so they're the ones that have really set up this topic. And so firstly, if you find a topic that's relevant for you and you want to go for it, the first step should be sending them an email and trying to have a conversation, because ultimately, what is written on that solicitation paper is about 25% of the actual picture. And there's a lot of decision and thoughtfulness that went into building out that solicitation. And by having a conversation, you can uncover more of that picture and really speak to all the needs that are behind that capability. And so, we highly recommend that, but that's a small window. That's about 3 weeks of the full bidding process. That's in the pre-release time frame that you're allowed to reach out. And then once the topic opens, you're barred from reaching out until, of course, they go to contract and the firms have been selected, the contract has been executed, and the work is underway. But for those TPOCs, that work does not end there. They are constantly working on those capabilities and trying to further enhance, whichever DoD agency it is, try and further enhance those capabilities. And so that's really where, going back to prior solicitations where you had that contact information available, can be an extra unlock. You reach out to those contacts and you say, hey, I saw 6 months ago you were looking for this type of capability, and we actually developed a more advanced, more valuable version of the capability you're looking for. That can intrigue them and start a new conversation that can shape a whole new topic and open up a new world of funding. So we really recommend that, and that is something that you can do today. You don't need to wait for anything to start going after that. That is completely open and available online. However, when you do that, it is important that you speak the DoD's language. And when we say that, there's a few things here. Of course, the first step here is that, we're really, when we talk about the DoD language, it's the minutia in how you're sort of framing your capability. So when you're talking to people in the Air Force, you're talking about airmen. When you're talking about people in the Army, you're talking about soldiers. When you're talking about people in the Navy, you're talking about sailors. But on top of that, it's really speaking to mission focus areas, contested environments and austere environments, and using the phraseology that they would use themselves so that you're speaking to your market. Any good marketer will tell you, you got to speak to your customer, and your customer speaks a very different language in some cases. On top of that, you look at today's DoD landscape. Well, it's no longer exactly a DoD landscape. It's also a DOW landscape. And when the DoD is sort of forward-facing and presenting themselves, they're referring to themselves as the DOW, Department of War. And these small things that might seem insignificant do make a difference in the way that your information and your outreach is received. And so we highly recommend you speak that language. But most importantly here really is that when you're framing your technology, you're speaking to a specific defense operational use case. And so it's not enough to just talk about the specs and talk about why your technology is better, faster, stronger. It's really about talking about why that, say, speed translates to an operational advantage. And so when you're talking about, let's say you're developing a hypersonic drone, Okay, so it's not just about the fact that your drone moves at hypersonic speeds, but it's what that can unlock, whether it's advanced ISR capabilities or stealth or low signature, whatever that unlocks for the operational use case is incredibly important to phrase in any sort of outreach you do. Yeah, Josh, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So yeah, when we're talking about building out a DoD network and everything, for some of these programs, this is an optional route to go down. But for programs like AFWERX, which many of you might already be familiar with, this is a integral piece of the puzzle. And why is that? Because the whole program is focused around customer discovery and delivering to those customers what you've discovered. And so the phase one is structured as a small piece of the pie, $75,000 prize to basically go out and conduct that customer discovery initially. The bidding process is you put forward your capabilities, you put forward your technology, you give a sense of what you think the Air Force can do with your technology, possibly without fully knowing the entire picture. And then when they give you that $75,000, you go out and you discover those customers and you talk to them and you understand what they're working on and what they're building towards. And by establishing that familiarity, you not only come away with a stronger proposal for the next round, but you really strengthen your DoD applications as a whole because you're speaking to the customers. So we find that this is a really good program to go after, both from the sake of securing funding, but also from the sake of positioning yourself to sell to the government. And so part of the process is the MOU. And the MOU is essentially the qualifying item that is required for the phase two application. And for that MOU, you basically it culminates in signatures from Air Force stakeholders and Air Force end users that basically validate that your technology is something they need and something they want. And so the idea is basically, Josh, if you can just go to the next slide quickly. The idea behind the stakeholder is that this is a customer that can actually provide funds towards a certain technology, that they control procurement and spending within their organization, and they can put dollars behind sourcing that technology once it's developed. And the end user is straightforwardly the person in the field that's using it. So sometimes they're the same entities and sometimes they're different. But essentially, there's a certain office that's qualified to buy drones and bring them into their unit, and there's another group of people on the ground, people sacrificing their lives, and the people on the front lines, and those people are essentially the end users that need to see value in using this towards an operational priority. Josh, if you can just go one more. Thank you. So then the reason you want the MOU and the reason you want to continue through this process in the near term is the 1.25 million prize that comes out of the AFWERX phase 2 or direct to phase 2, depending on how you approach it. And this is an opportunity to take that customer discovery and put it to work. So this is where you start developing a prototype, start developing out the capabilities so they're real, and that they can be adapted towards the Air Force mission that you laid out in your conversations with the stakeholders and end users. And so while it's a really impactful way to get that funding alone is not going to necessarily get you to market. And that's why we have other programs like the TAC by StratFi program, which are additional funding opportunities that kind of cover the gap that the valley of death, as Josh was talking about, really helps you bridge that gap to the valley of death, over the valley of death, and get yourself to market, get yourself ready to sell to defense customers and turn this into not just an R&D project, but a program of record. And so depending on which route you choose, TACFI is pretty straightforward. It's a $4 million funding opportunity or something around that, depending on the solicitation. And it needs to be cost shared by private investment so that the risk is shared between both you and the Air Force. For StratFi, the cost share is a little more complex. There's private investment there's AFWorks, and there's also the initial stakeholder that signs on the MOU. They also need to put up the funds for that. But that funding opportunity can be up to $60 million. So we're talking about a pretty serious unlock here to bridging that gap and propelling yourselves to market. And in some industries like space, where infrastructure is expensive, these programs are critical to turning ideas into real capabilities. Yeah, Josh, if you can just continue on. Perfect. So competitions and challenges. These oftentimes feel like insignificant programs that are, to some companies, a bit of a waste of time because the funding ceilings can be quite low. But we see them as really important in the process as they create that initial awareness and validation of your technology, that you're really meeting a defense need, and that you're pursuing something that means something to the DoD. And there's pretty much every DoD agency has some form of challenge. There's AFWorks Challenge, which is a little bit of they set up a niche challenge program that focuses on one specific capability and invites all sorts of players to bid at that, whether they're small businesses or large entities, potentially universities, doesn't matter. You look at the Army X-Tech program, which is really just for small businesses, and that's a way to it fills the same sort of gap that AFWorks does, but for the Army, does it a little bit differently, but you get that same sort of ability to put your technology in front of stakeholders and end users in the Army. And then you have programs like DARPA, which they actually just released a new challenge yesterday, which is focused on vertical lift and essentially lifting payloads that are heavier than the drone itself or the unmanned system itself. And it's a very exciting program, but DARPA is always focused on the things that absolutely shake up the industry, provide really cutting edge innovation that's maybe 20 years away from now, but focus on formulating those ideas into concepts that can be actuated down the road. And when we're talking about validation from these challenge programs, we've seen companies. We have a client of ours that they started submitting through some of these challenge programs, and their first award was a $5,000 Army X-Tech award, a very insignificant amount of money that they basically couldn't do anything with. But that traction and that validation that they got from the program within 18 months turned into about $3 million in SBIR funding, and they're actually transitioning now into a program of record. So they did things fast, but that's not out of the question for any other type of firm, and there's many firms that can relate to that experience. So yeah, Josh, if you can just go to the next slide. Perfect. So, unfortunately, those challenge programs have low ceilings, low funding thresholds, but RFIs are even lower. They're no funding, but they are just as an important program to get involved with. And why is that? Because this is sort of the soft clay that gets hardened to an RFP, a request for a proposal, that can lead to millions of dollars of funding. And the idea here is the DoD's sitting on a concept. They don't really know exactly how to action it. They don't know exactly what capabilities are out there that can meet their need, but they know they have this challenge. And so they're looking to basically conduct that vendor discovery, the research that's necessary to understand what they should be targeting their funds towards. So this is an incredible opportunity for companies who are offering something new and innovative to just make the DoD aware that it even exists. Because if they don't know it exists, they don't know to solicit for it. And that's a problem we see a lot of our clients struggle with, is that they're offering something that's absolutely new, absolutely breakthrough, never been done before, wonderful, but who knows about it? Who's going to ask for something that they don't know exists? And so this is these type of opportunities are a great way to just raise your hand and say, hey, we exist and we know how to do this. Josh, if you can just go to the next slide quickly. Perfect. And so, we're talking about early stage validation, but when you look at prime contractors, you're talking about, tens and maybe more than that years of experience in contracting with the DoD. And that, while the small business programs are really important to getting new innovation out there, there's a lot of risk that's inherent with that. And primes kind of offer the opposite. It's low risk. They know they can develop these products and get these things into the hands of DoD operators, but they don't necessarily offer something that's pushing the boundaries, and they can be a bit rigid and inflexible in the way they develop these systems. And so partnerships between the two capabilities lead to really amazing results. And also, as a small business, this is a partnership that you should definitely be looking towards, and it's not inaccessible. So one way to do it, which is a little bit harder, is you establish a relationship with these primes, and they control these contracts that are for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, and you find a way to get yourself involved as a subcontractor on their contract, which could be a very small piece of the pie in the grand scheme of things, but for the small business, it's a few $1,000,000 to go develop something, and that makes a very big difference. But I guess one of the more accessible ways to set up these partnerships initially is actually by doing the reverse. It's applying for SBIRs and having the subs be these large primes. And that's because essentially, from the DoD's perspective, this de-risks the project itself. It says, okay, if you can develop this, you have an ally that knows how to integrate it into the DoD. And that's often one of the biggest issues in getting these things into the hands of the warfighters. And so those partnerships can really give you a leg up on your competition, who very often, especially in the SBIR program, have very little familiarity in integrating into the DoD before that. But on top of that, these primes, they're encouraged to get involved in this. And if you go on Lockheed Martin's website, you can find portals to submit your ideas, quad charts, and white papers that can lead to these subcontracting opportunities where they'll come in and either subcontract on a phase 2 or provide a letter of support and really start to plant the seeds towards a fruitful and hopefully very significant relationship. Josh, yeah, if you can, thank you. So far, everything we've been talking about are things you can do, over the phone, over Zoom, behind screens. But there's an element of this that needs to be done in person. Just like any sort of business activity, there's a certain in-person flair that's necessary that is not precluded from DoD contracting. And some of these programs that are really key to get involved with in person are things like industry days, where the DoD is going to have an open panel, and they're going to basically lay out the sort of things that they're looking towards, capabilities that they are interested in, and challenges they might have that need to be solved, and basically make industry aware of these issues so that they can solve these issues. And so this is a really good open forum to connecting with the right customer and building something together. Your capability might get you 70% of the way, but that you can develop things in a different way that will solve this need. And you might find out from these industry days that there's millions of dollars behind that if you collect 1% of, you'll be very happy with. And so definitely recommend that. And on top of that, getting out in front of at conferences and DoD events is also really important. Things like AUSA, Soft Week, Capital Factories, Supernova event. These things are sometimes a burden, but a worthwhile endeavor for sure. There's a lot that we uncover at these events that even though there's a lot that's available in open source research, there's a certain element of it that can only be discovered in these forums. And we actually have this experience not that long ago where we attended a conference that was a DoD focused conference, and one of the program managers for this seemingly niche SBIR program was basically telling the audience that they are opening up this program to a much larger subset of small businesses. One where we had a client that previously didn't fit in, but now fits in. And that was the case for, it basically opened up the door for about 95% of SBIR applicants, when previously it was open for about less than 5% of SBIR applicants. So the only way you would know about that is either if you were at the conference, or if you somehow went through that specific solicitation and happened to see that they amended it on one line on page 86 of 100 and something page document. It was really something that you're only going to see at this event. And so we told this client of ours, they applied for it, and they turned that application to a phase 1 and later on a $2 million phase 2. So, these things, it's really important to have your ear to the ground through your devices and also in person. Yeah, Josh, if you can just go to the next slide. So I guess to put this all together, essentially getting started in all of these DoD contracting efforts really is a manageable and a manageable schedule that you can put together. I would say first and foremost, you should be doing that open source research, understanding where the priorities lie, and really honing in on how you can frame your technology to meet defense needs. On top of that, something else that's just important to mention for a second is that registering on things like sam.gov and SBIR.gov are really crucial. And these requirements are for having the right registrations are getting a little bit more stringent. And having that ready at the outset means that when a program arises that you're relevant for, you can pull the trigger on right away. You don't need to wait or get held up by bureaucracy. So in that first stage, definitely recommend doing all of that. As you move to the second stage, I think that it's really important to start conducting that outreach. Reach out to the TPOCs, reach out to people in your network that are DoD representatives and operators, decision makers, whoever they are, and start having those conversations. They might not be able to unlock something, but they might know someone who knows someone who knows someone that can unlock something for you. And so just really putting yourself out there and socializing your solution goes a long way. And having a quad chart or a white paper ready for that stage is really important as well. As you move to the sort of later stage of this, that's when you start applying for phase ones, challenge programs, potentially some phase twos, depending on how far along your development roadmap is, and starting to get that traction through contracting opportunities and try and secure whatever funding you can to sort of lay the seeds for growing that R&D project into a much bigger capability. And then finally, as you progress through this pipeline, you really want to start looking at larger contracting opportunities, phase twos, OTAs, programs where any of that early validation you set in the prior weeks or months can be turned into big dollars. And while it might be a little bit soon for TACFI and StratFi, there's a lot of things you can action on. The DIU has programs that turn around contracts in 90 days, and they are constantly coming out with solicitations. So being ready to go after those big dollar opportunities is really impactful. Anyway, with that, I'll hand it back over to Josh.
Thanks, Evan. So just recapping, we just talked about how to be kind of practical tips to go about building that DoD network and where the opportunities lie. Our approach is a three-step process to make it simple, which starts with strategizing and planning, understanding where the opportunities lay for the companies that we're working with, and trying to do a pair fit between the different opportunities that are out there and your current technological roadmap. Because we don't want to draw too far away from that. We want the SBIRs, the OTAs, the BAAs to see something that serves you so that you can eventually go to market, whether it's a dual use market, whether it's a defense market, or if it's private sector market. After that, step two is creating an agency buy-in where we're working on building those relationships, reaching out to the TPOCs and getting an idea of whether or not there's a real opportunity here for you, and doing it while also establishing buy-in. And then the last part is building the proposal itself, putting together the narrative around your technology, focusing it on the end user, which is so important in the DoD world, specializing in the language and the messaging, and to really put something together which really appeals to the evaluators, but also to somebody who's not necessarily technical and will review this and be intrigued by what you can bring to the table. For us, next steps is pretty basic. If DoD non-dilutive funding is a fit for you, and it's certainly not a fit for everyone, which is totally okay, but if it seems like it is, and you're interested in either increasing your win percentage or the amount of wins, or you're looking to get that first win, You can reach out to us and we can schedule time to see if there's alignment and also relevant opportunities that could net funding while also helping you stay aligned with your current product roadmap. You can reach out to me. My name is Josh. Like I said before, Josh Barone. Here's my email, josh@grantengine.com. And you can also join us for our next webinar, which is going to be focused on Army Innovation Funding Programs. We'll do a deep dive in that webinar into SBIR programs from the Army, X-Tech, Fuse, and other ways the Army is engaging with businesses to fund their R&D. And that'll be on January 14th, 2025. This year, 2026, I'm sorry, we're moving to the next year at 2 p.m. Eastern. So now we have a poll up here. Let's see. The question is, would you like Grant Engine to reach out with you for more information? And we see that people here are very interested in this. And if you are interested, first of all, we will send the slides. And also in the slides, we're going to include some resources that we have out for everyone and some tools. So that's really it. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. But in the meantime, you have my email. You can be in touch with me, and we'll be happy to schedule a call and talk it over at your convenience. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Any questions from anyone? Right on. All right. I think you both covered it all. And yeah, as Josh mentioned, we put it in the chat, Wednesday, January 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll be talking about the Army Innovation Programs. And we're here for you when you need help. So be in touch. Great. I think, Josh or Zev, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to wrap up with, but I think we can put a bow on the webinar if there's no other questions.
That's fine by me. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Amazing. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.